is going on, everybody? It's your girl Pam with 2200 Taps. Dude, I got a good one today. I got a good man that has graciously decided to come on the podcast today. If I sound a little rusty, it's because I am. I promised you guys an episode a month, but it's been two. Oh, wow. So here we are. But I wanted to really get you guys up to speed on who I have today. His name is Michael Sugrue. Sugrue, correct? Sugrue?
You got it right. Yeah,
Okay.
you got it.
Man, I was so scared to butcher that, and I got it right, and I still outed myself. Michael is... I can't wait to just jump into this, and we're going to dive right in. Michael is an Air Force veteran. He's pretty much a badass. I was like, Air Force, and then I found out what you did. I was like, okay, he's pretty badass in my books. And also a retired police officer. So the whole concept of what we do is we have people share their stories, you know, of trauma and tragedy, but how they've been able to overcome it. Somebody needs to hear that, right? I know I needed to hear it, and that's what helped me take suicide off the table years ago. And Michael, I gotta applaud you, man. What you are doing is you are literally hitting the pavement, making sure everybody understands what the hell your mission is, and I love it. So thank you so much for being on, and I can't wait to dive in, but could you kind of update me and my listeners a little bit on your backstory, and then we'll really get into your stuff. Is that cool?
Absolutely. I'll try to make a very long story short, but I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, was born and raised, and I went straight into the military out of college as a butter bar in the Air Force.
Oh, yes.
I was in security forces, which for those that don't know it's a bunch of different things. Honestly, it's basic law enforcement, it's force protection, air base ground defense, nuclear security, foreign airfield assessments, all those things. So we're pretty much like the infantry of the Air Force if there were to be one. And on top of that, I was also Phoenix Raven, which is a subset of security forces members. And I served 6.5 years honorably. I got out as a captain. I served in the Middle East, South America, Europe, all over the United States. And I went straight into civilian law enforcement back here in the San Francisco Bay Area for the Walnut Creek Police Department. Bunch of different assignments. I was a training officer, detective, undercover for 2 years on a California State narcotics task force, eventually a patrol sergeant where I'm running teams on the street, and a public information officer. A very tragic incident happened as a brand new sergeant. I had just been promoted, and I was involved in a fatal officer-involved shooting. And that incident, literally, it changed my entire path in life. It changed my trajectory. There's a whole bunch of things that happened. I'm sure we'll get into some of those. Yeah. And it really just caused my life to spiral downward. And I medically retired back in 2018 for what I like to call post-traumatic stress injury versus disorder. And now my mission really is sharing my story so that they're not alone, and that there is help. And more importantly, you know, I'm living proof that you can come from the darkest depths of your life to the point where you don't want to be here anymore, and you can live a whole new life with a whole new purpose. And that's what I'm doing here today.
Well, I'm excited for so many different reasons. I was doing some homework, listening in on some of the podcasts you've been on, really good, you know, just episodes. And I noticed, like, I like to be the one that goes against the grit when it comes to interviewing. I got to interview Taya Kyle, and I'm like, Jesus, she's like, how do you ask her what hasn't already been asked, right? Or people like that. And I was like, man, that's kind of what I was seeing with you. It's like the same thing over and over again, which is important. But how can I like tweak it where I can maybe get something new out of you? And I think just organically that's going to happen. Just based on the vulnerability I've heard you on the shows, and then the questions I like to ask. That's why I'm super, super excited to have you here because, like you just said, you went through a pretty traumatic experience, and we'll get to that here in a second. But there was one thing that you said on, forgive me, I forget what show you're on. You said it on the show, and I identified with you quickly, you know, about how childhood trauma can play into our professional trauma. And then that's just like, but you said something about, correct me if I'm wrong, growing up without your dad. You said something quickly on that. Was that right? Did I hear that right, or did I not? and how that something with the childhood that you said that resonated with me. I can't remember what you said. Forgive me on that.
Well, there's actually two very big things.
Okay.
So, my stepfather, who came into my life very early, he was in law enforcement. He was a very positive role model. He's the reason why I went into law enforcement. But on the flip side of that, my biological father, after my parents got divorced, years later, he got himself into alcohol and drugs and a whole bunch of issues. And to the point where my biological father wasn't really as present and involved in my life as he should have been.
Mm.
And so there was a lot of consequences to that, which I didn't realize until honestly a few years into my recovery for post traumatic stress. I just kind of forgot about things. I pushed things away. And, I go into detail about that in my book that came out,
Mhm.
but it's not something that I often talk about on interviews.
Yeah, and we don't have to. By all means, we'll respect whichever way you want to take it. I remember you'd said something similar, and that was my childhood.
We can talk about everything and anything as far as I'm
Cool.
concerned.
Sweet. Well, thank you for that. I remember when you said that, I'm like, this was my childhood. My bio dad wasn't in the picture. My stepdad, retired chief of police. I grew up with police officers. Like I was like, huh. And here lately, I have my PTS. I want to start maybe using that to understand that better instead of disorder. Um, it, it was just like a lot of parallels of me and you when it came to certain things. Um, and I wouldn't have felt that way had you not shared that. So that's why I was saying that. It's just thank you for that. I think more people need to hear like our childhood can really impact us in a way that we don't realize when we're older. So I want to jump in real.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that it's kind of actually interesting. And I was in denial about this for many years. But what often happens to us in childhood, it actually makes us usually very resilient, very adaptive, very good at what we do. And it leads us towards these professions in both the military and as first responders. And it makes us very good at what we do, but we never actually want to acknowledge the impact of that and deal with it. And so I think it's actually much more common than people think and people talk about. But many of our first responders, many of our active military and veterans have adverse childhoods. And it could be, in some cases, very extreme, or it can be things that are minor, but it's affected us and it's made us who we are today.
For sure. And I've heard that a lot where a lot of people escape their child. They join the military because of their childhood. They want to get out of that situation. So with that, let me ask you this then. How did that form you as a man who chose to do that, to join the service, not having him there but having such a positive role model with your stepdad? Like, how did that form you as a man to decide, hey, I want to do this and I want to keep helping people?
So it goes all the way back to when I was 8 years old. My father, he worked for Sausalito Police Department at that time, and I became a police volunteer. I mean, people are like, "What? 8 years old?" But I was literally just a glorified car washer, paper filer. I mean, it was nothing exciting for me. It was because I was so young, and I got my official ID card, and the
Oh,
highlight was riding with McGruff every year in the annual
yes.
city parade. So,
Yeah.
but that's where I literally saw the brotherhood, the sisterhood, like where I saw the camaraderie, and this was a smaller department my father first worked for, and everybody knew each other. It was just a giant family, is what it was, and that's what I think really initially drew me towards it. And his brother, also my uncle, was also in law enforcement, and my step uncle was in law enforcement. So literally, I just, man, growing up, I heard all these great stories and all these cool things. And in high school, I became a police explorer where I was actually doing ride-alongs with officers on the street, and
Hmm.
that's where I sealed the deal. I mean, I remember like, and I was in Richmond now. So Richmond, for people that don't know, not Richmond, Virginia, but Richmond, California, is at the time, it's still bad, but it was one of the most dangerous cities in the nation.
Yeah.
Just very, very rough city outside of the San Francisco Bay. And it was just nonstop action. I mean, nonstop. And I couldn't get enough of it. And so I made my decision in high school that I would set myself up for a career in law enforcement. And some things changed. So my original plan was to go into the FBI. And I knew
Mm,
that by doing that, I had to have a college degree and I had to have some experience other than just college. And
right.
so I thought, what more perfect than the military? And so my grandfather was in the Army Air Corps. And I actually, believe it or not, I looked into the Army and the Air Force and I went through the full Army officer basic training course. I passed it. But the Army wasn't going to give me much for college. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. So let me go check out the Air Force. And so, of course, I go to the Air Force and they're like, we're going to pay for your school. All right. So you're good to go, come with us. And so I ended up going to two boot camps and I got a full scholarship to college. And like I said, when I graduated, I was going to do my 4 years and that was it. And a lot of things happened.
Mm.
Most importantly is I got offered Germany and that extended my time, my commitment in the Air Force. And a couple months after getting to Germany, 9/11 happened. And then shortly after that, I was in the Middle East. So because of all of that, I ended up staying longer, the 6.5 years. But during my time in the military, I worked with the Marshals, the DEA, the FBI, and I realized like that's not for me. Like I didn't want to be in an office most of the time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be like dealing with paperwork. Like it's part of the reason I got out of the Air Force because as you move up in rank, it's less hands-on, it's less being out in the field, and it's more administrative. And I wanted to be out there every single day, pushing a black and white in uniform, going to calls, and just tearing it up. So
I love that. And that's actually a really good segue leading into your career as a police officer. Um, you got in, and one interview I heard you said that you were just one of those hard chargers, man. Like you were writing the most tickets. You were just you were going at it, and a lot of the senior guys kind of they didn't like that about you. I did, but I envied that about you because it's like you're like that horse at the starting line, like, let me go, dude, let me go. And then you just went. So, t-
it,
yeah, could you tell us a little more about that? Like, what was that like for you?
well, the ironic thing is, I see now, many years later, why those old salty guys and gals were. But at the time, honestly, I didn't care. Like, I literally had a goal from day one that I wanted to be undercover. I wanted to do
Mm,
narcotics cases. I wanted to work for the California Department of Justice. And so I knew that our agency, we had one position that went to a regional drug task force. And that position only opened up maybe every 4 or 5 years, and that was it. So like when one gets it, it's locked in for that long. And so I made it my mission that I was going to work the graveyard shift, which normally you do anyways when you're brand new. I mean, nobody wants to work graveyards,
yeah.
but I love the night shift because it was a lot less reactive and it was a lot more proactive. And so, and I'm not exaggerating when I say, but I used to do probably 20 to 30 enforcement stops a night, and that's not like looking for soccer mom, driving with the brake light out. Like I'm literally out there looking for guns, dope, drugs, parolees, people on probation. Like I'm trying to get into motel rooms and search cars and, take people to prison and jail. And that's what my passion was. And so literally I went out there every single day and gave it 110%. It was so bad that some days and like I would start initially at 9:30 at night, get off at 7:30 in the morning. And I remember driving back to the station in the morning, getting ready to go home, and I would see this car go by. And I was like, oh no, 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 no. We're stopping this car. And I ended up staying like 2, 3 hours, you know,
Oh
after
God.
my shift, but I didn't care because it was just like, and now can I do that now? Probably not because I've aged a little bit and I don't have quite that motivation. But also, looking back, I didn't have all this exposure to trauma at that time,
Yeah.
and that's really where those salty dogs come in because. And now I'm one of them. I mean, although don't get me wrong, if I was still working, I'd be tearing it up. But the the thing is that just all this stuff that we see, all this negativity, all this, traumatic incidents,
Hmm.
all this stress, it takes a toll on us, physically, mentally, on our relationships, whether that's, marriages or partnerships or our children. And so now I understand it's not, I used to think they were lazy. I honestly thought, like, man, who are these people? Like, they're just sitting back doing the bare minimum. And it's like, you know what? They're burnt out. They're
Yeah.
literally just trying to go home in one piece. But yeah, I'm kind of getting excited talking about this now because I miss it. I really do. I miss those days, and I just remember how excited, motivated I was back then, and nothing was going to stop me. I was literally, I mean, nothing was going to stop me. That's how I felt. It's just invincible.
That's wild, but I get it to an extent. Not personally me, but my stepdad's just like that. He even though he's retired chief of police, like he's working, as director of security at a I won't say what city, but like he's very like he can't get enough of it. And I'm like, dude, you got one kidney and you're in your 60s. You ready to be done? He's like, nope. I'm just like, you can't take it out of him. It's like I get pumped up when we talk about, getting on the water and seeing crappy waves out. I'm like, get me out there. But in reality, it's not going to happen anymore, right? But to your point about like how stressful it is on the family, I know real quick, one of my good friends, mentors, actually, when I was a police explorer, she was a police chief out in Salinas, California. And
Oh yeah,
yeah, she was out there for a while. Her son, she actually swore in her son. He, not for Salinas, but a different department. He lasted maybe 5 years and he was done. He was just, again,
that's
he couldn't take it. He was struggling. His department didn't have his back. And he went into real estate because he's like, I can't, I'm done. So to your point, it's like the longevity of that career, it's kind of few and far between to actually hit X amount of years and retire. Um,
you know,
just
I
wild.
think it's like people need to understand. Like for me, it was a calling. It wasn't just like some random job. Like this sounds like a cool job. Let me go
Yeah.
check it out. And Um, I think that's the difference is that you really got to want this. I mean, you really got to want to do this.
Hmm.
And if you're just going out there thinking like, hey, this is good pay, good benefits, let me give this a try, odds are it's not going to last because you have to make so many sacrifices. I mean, so many sacrifices, so many missed holidays, your kids' games, I mean, sleep. I mean, just sacrifice after sacrifice after sacrifice. And you really got to believe that you're out there making a difference, that you're doing good and you're trying to save the world. I mean, that's literally what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, it's a very noble profession for so many different reasons. I told somebody recently, I'm like, imagine you going through the most, a civilian. I'm like, imagine you going through the most traumatic event in your life. Remember that event and how it affected you. Now multiply that by every single day for years and tell me you wouldn't be a different person,
Hundreds.
you know? And whether you're going off to war, combat, stateside, police officer, first responder, doesn't matter. Like you are being exposed to the worst of the worst. And it's like you don't have time to process it. You don't have time to do whatever because you have to keep doing your job all day, every day, all night, you know? So with that, I want to hit on uh, one of the biggest, you know, stories or events that happened to you that you've been sharing that has gotten us to this point where you have a mission because we're losing way too many people to suicide. Way too, not just police officers, but civilians as well. However, our focus and passion are first responders, police officers, veterans, right? And it's weird. Every day I see it on your social media. We lose another one. We lost another one. We lose another one. And I'm just like, this, what can we do to help this mission, right? Which is why I wanted to have you on because your story is intense and I feel like somebody needs to hear this. So with that, can you talk a little bit about what happened to you when you were a young officer and what that did to you or whatever event it was that changed you?
Yeah, so it was back in December of 2012. And I have to tell you where my life was at that point. My life was perfect. I was happily married. I had a beautiful daughter that was a few years old. I just bought my dream house. Had been promoted quicker and faster than anybody. I mean, my career was off the charts. Like, I was hoping to be chief of police someday, and I had everything just squared away. I mean, everything was going right. And this shift happened the day after Christmas, so it was a graveyard shift. The shift started, I believe, at 9:30 at night, and I was getting off duty at 7:30 in the morning. It was our Friday, and I was excited because I was already looking forward to the weekend plans with my daughter and my wife. And I remember going into work just kind of on a high, honestly, because just everything was perfect. And when I got to work, it was chill, like everybody was in a good mood. It was quiet. Nothing was going on. I mean, I did do some traffic stops and I did write some tickets, but it was the after Christmas. It wasn't Christmas, so kind of like that whole leeway grace period was gone. But and then there was an overlapping team, swing shift team, but they went home. And when they went home a little bit after 1 a.m., I was the only supervisor on duty for the entire city.
Hmm.
And I remember I'd gotten a meal with one of my officers, and then I went to a little dark parking lot and I was reviewing reports, getting ready to go home. And then a little bit after 3 a.m., the female dispatcher, the only one on duty at that time, gets on the radio very frantic and says the address on the Creekside Drive and says that there's a woman inside a condominium and a man with a knife. And so we all just start driving towards that location. No cars on the street, blowing through lights, literally just already starting to imagine, kind of prepare for what I'm going to encounter and have to deal with. About halfway there, the dispatcher gets back on and says now that the boyfriend and girlfriend are barricaded inside a bedroom. And I was confused. So I asked for clarification on the radio and I said, is the boyfriend the one with the knife? Or is there a third party, third subject armed with a knife? And she quickly clarified, no, there's a third party armed with a knife.
Hmm.
And so now it's just like, this is already very highly unusual. I mean, we go to domestic violence calls all the time, arguments, but now I'm totally confused as to what's going on, whether someone broke in or do they know each other? What's kind of like the background of what's going on here. And I don't have any of that information.
Hmm.
And so I pull up on scene. Literally, I get there in just a matter of a couple minutes. It's a very dark street. It's high residential. It's all like condominiums, high rise apartments. And I know this complex, but I don't know this particular unit where it's at. And so as I start to get out of my car, the dispatcher gets on the radio, but now she starts screaming into the radio and she says that there's a struggle, there's a struggle. And then she loses all communication inside that condominium. And so now we have no contact whatsoever with the female that was calling. Thank God at the same time, one of my officers, a female officer, pulls up right behind me. We have our guns out. We literally just start running towards the sound of these blood curdling screams we can hear from a distance. And it's a woman screaming, and it literally to this day, it's one of the worst sounds I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she's bleeding out, being stabbed, but literally she's screaming for her life. And so we just start running, not knowing where we're going. Eventually, we have to crawl underneath an outside stairwell, and we get into this big open courtyard, and there's two-story attached condominiums basically all around us. And we end up finding the unit, and it goes from these blood-curdling screams to just eerie, dead silence. I mean, no noise whatsoever, not just from the unit, but outside. There's nobody outside. I don't see anyone else. I don't hear any noises. And now we're announcing ourselves. I know I've got more officers coming. It's just her and I. I try to kick open the door. It doesn't work. My officer notices there's a huge louvered window that's been completely shattered inside the condominium. And so again, we're announcing ourselves, please come out, show us your hands, show us your hands. Nothing, no sound, no movement, nothing. So we look at each other, we go in. Goes in first, I'm right behind her. Immediately, we're right inside this kitchen area. And there's a cutout where I can see it goes through to like a family room, dining room area. And so we both exit the kitchen. She goes right, which goes towards the front door and the stairwell. I go left. I clear the family room, dining room area, don't find anybody. There's nothing unusual, no signs of a disturbance other than that broken window into the kitchen. I now meet the officer at the bottom of the stairwell. And now we're literally shoulder to shoulder. The locked front door is directly behind us, and we're at the base of this stairwell. To my right is a solid wall. And we can see that there's some kind of opening at the top of the stairs that goes to the left. We don't know if that's a hallway, a bedroom. But again, our guns are out. We're announcing ourselves. And then moments later, a male partially comes out, just sweating profusely, literally just staring straight through us. No reaction whatsoever. I mean, literally looks like a zombie. And we can't see the right side of his body. We can only see the left side of his body. And now we're yelling, show us your hands, show us your hands. Nothing. I mean, I don't remember eyes blinking. I don't remember facial expressions. No words. just staring straight through us. At some point during this, two more officers enter the condominium. I yell for one of them to get on the taser. The male officer, there's a male and female officer. He says, I've got the taser. He positions directly behind myself and that first officer that arrived on scene at the bottom of the stairwell. The second female officer goes perpendicular to the stairwell. And she can't see up the stairwell, but we can.
Hmm.
Moments later, he comes all the way out. And my partner yells, he's got a knife! He's got a knife! And in his right hand, he was clenching a full-size chef's knife or butcher knife. Again, same look, no reaction. And now we're yelling, drop the knife, drop the knife. Nothing. He then takes the knife up and is stabbing over his head and starts coming towards us. At that point, I fire my duty weapon. The male officer behind us deploys the taser. Both female officers discharge their duty weapon. He's now at the bottom of the stairs. The two female officers reposition to the family room, dining room area. The male officer that tried to tase dropped the taser and has his gun out. I don't see any blood. I don't see any injuries. This isn't like the movie. I don't know if I hit him. I don't know if the other officer hit him. I mean, all I know is he's at the bottom of the stair and he's still clenching this huge knife.
Jeez.
And now, literally, I'm just a few feet from him. And my gun is out. I'm yelling, drop the knife, drop the knife. And he is between us and the couple that is upstairs. And we don't know if they're dying out, if they've already been killed, but he is between us and him. And then he starts to come back up with the knife, literally just a few feet from us. And at that point, I fire my weapon. The other officer fired his weapon. And there's no nice way to say it, but he was killed instantly. I mean, absolutely devastating wounds. One of his eyes was completely gone.
Yeah.
I mean, blood everywhere. We checked his vitals. There were none. We already had medical that was staging nearby. So we radioed to have medical come in. The officers went upstairs to check on that couple. And thank God we got it, because this subject had been stabbing through the bedroom door with that knife. And the door was literally coming off the hinges. And this couple was physically barricading their bodies against this door, trying to prevent him from coming in and killing them. I have no doubt to this day that had we not gotten there when we did, they would be dead. They would not be here today. But thank God they were both okay. They're both alive today.
Jeez, dude. You can't. You talk about that experience in a way that dude, you just can't. How can you not feel the emotion behind that? You know what I mean? Thank you for sharing that. Because that, I mean, when you said the screams, I get that. I worked a SAR case where when you hear a mom scream for her son, you just they don't go away. That never leaves you, you know? So with that, I know there was a lot that came from that incident, a lot that dragged on for quite a few years after, when the family sued you guys, or tried to sue you guys, correct?
We were immediately sued. We were immediately sued by the family. We were cleared pretty quickly by both the district attorney and our own internal investigators. It was a justified shooting. You know, we had two victims, witnesses. We saved their lives.
No.
But the whole issue is that even today, years later, we don't know why that young man did what he did, because, and that's what makes the situation so difficult, is that this wasn't some hardened criminal. This wasn't some gangbanger, some serial killer. Like, literally, this young man had no criminal history, no police contacts. He was a good young man who was well-liked, was working. And this day, we don't know if he had a psychotic snap, a drug-induced psychosis. I mean, he had no history of mental illness whatsoever. And so, you know, I used to be very angry about this lawsuit, but now I get it. I understand it. The family wanted answers. And because of that, and we all wanted answers, to be frank with you, but I ended up as a defendant in federal court in San Francisco years later. So the shooting happened December 27, 2012, and the trial started the week of September 2016. And I literally was on trial as a defendant for 2 weeks. And so this nightmare incident that I wanted to so forget, I couldn't forget a single detail. I had to remember every single last detail of this horrific incident because I knew I was going to be in a federal court fighting for this, literally fighting for this. And so I couldn't forget it. And meanwhile, I'm having these constant nightmares, just lost my marriage, health problems. I mean, you name it. I literally experienced a lot of darkness during this time.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what did that do to you when you took your gun belt off that following day and just try to decompress? Like, what did that whole experience do to you?
Well, hours later, we got interviewed without sleep for, I mean, literally over 24 hours. And when I got back to the station and took my gun belt out, it was literally they were collecting my things and putting them on bags, and I was being photographed, and my fingers were being checked for gunpowder residue, and literally I felt like a criminal.
Hmm.
And for all intents and purposes, I was, because they were investigating a homicide. But to go through that process, to be on the other side of it, is indescribable. I mean, absolutely indescribable. And then, you know, for me, it was like a nightmare. I was hoping it was something that didn't happen. I was hoping that I was going to wake up one day and it was just a bad dream, but it wasn't. It was reality. And I remember getting home that first morning after being up and being interviewed, and I was already feeling numb and detached. And I literally just wanted to go upstairs and go to sleep. And that started isolation. That started drinking too much. It started a whole another bunch of problems that I just was hoping I was going to numb. And the thing was, I wasn't dealing with any of the problems. I was just numbing it and making it worse.
So, what kind of a husband or daddy did your family get when you were going through all that crap? You're just isolating, or what did that look like?
I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I mean, I might have been there physically at times, but I wasn't there mentally. I wasn't there emotionally. Literally, I couldn't sleep. And when I did sleep, I was having horrific nightmares.
Hmm.
And so drinking at night was the only way I could eventually pass out. And as you know, as everybody knows listening to this or watching it, that never makes things better. It makes things much worse. But I made a lot of mistakes early on in my career, and one of those is that I told myself I would never talk about the job or bring it home because I thought by doing that I would be protecting my family. And it's one of the worst mistakes I've ever made as far as my career. And I talk about a lot of mistakes in my book, but because of that, I didn't have that established relationship with at the time. And we're divorced now, but I didn't have that relationship where I could come home and honestly share about what happened at work because I didn't want to do that. And I felt like if I did that, I was going to scare her and I didn't want her to be worried. But I let everything bottle up inside, and there was no outlet. There was no healthy outlet. And
Hmm.
so there was nobody that I could talk to about my feelings and about the things that I was going through. And it got to a breaking point where I finally tried to open up to my spouse, but it was too late. There had already been too much damage. And when I needed her, and nothing against her because I'm the one that put myself in a situation. But when I finally opened up, it was too late. She wasn't there for me
Yeah.
when I needed her.
Now you said you went down a really dark hole for the most part. You were not in a good place. You were ready to check out. You
I
were,
didn't want to be here anymore.
yeah.
I hoped that I died in the line of duty. So I had an active plan to take my own life outside of work. But what I did do was I put my officer safety, my tactics, I put that aside, my judgment, and I put myself purposely into dangerous situations, hoping that a bad guy took me out. So opposite of suicide by cop, I was hoping for suicide by bad guy. And that's how bad it got because I figured that at least if I duty, at least my daughter is going to be taken care of. At least she's going to know who her dad was. I'm always going to be remembered. They're not going to let her forget about her dad. And that was the thing is that I thought that was okay. You know what? So if I die on the job, at least my family's good to go.
That's a lot of pain right there, you know? That's a crap ton of pain. Ugh. Well, with that, you did mention that one of your best friends actually attempted, and that really was the game changer for you.
He saved my life. So my friend John Davison, he has his own chapter in our book. Talks about experience, but he was a Vietnam veteran, and then he became a reserve officer with my police department. He worked for 35 years. This man volunteered, didn't get paid a dime, volunteered 35 years, and that's how I met
Whoa.
him. And when I was an officer, before I got promoted, I would ride with him and we would spend hours and hours together and we became very good friends. Well, he had retired a couple years earlier. I was still working. I was on the street working day shift and had some things going on at home with his relationship. His dogs passed away and just, some personal stuff. And I knew he was going through some, I had no idea how bad it was for him.
Mm.
And it was so bad that he did try to take his own life. And I was on duty and the call comes out. They put out the address of suicide in progress. And I didn't realize it right away, but it was my friend John's house. And he had literally slashed both wrists, stabbed himself in the torso multiple times, OD'd on multiple prescription medications. And I saw him when the ambulance just brought him into the trauma center, just covered in blood, in and out of consciousness. And I literally had like 30 seconds before they rushed him off to emergency surgery. And I remember looking him in the eye, telling him he was going to be okay, he was going to make it. But honestly, I didn't think he was. I didn't see how he was going to survive this. And I remember sitting in the hospital for hours. His sister had driven up. I was sitting there with people from the agency, and all I could think about was this guilt and shame that I had of why didn't I do something about this? Like, why didn't I see the signs? How could I have let my best friend try to kill himself? And then I started thinking about my young daughter. How is she going to feel when I'm not here? Is she going to blame herself? And what's going to be the ripple effect on her life and on her kids? And it was because of that, a month after his suicide attempt, I finally got the strength and courage after 4 years of suffering in silence to finally pick up that phone and ask for help. That's what saved my life. That's why I'm here today.
His attempt saved your life.
Absolutely. And he's alive today, God, and I tell him that every time I see him because he still has so much shame and guilt about what he did. But I said, brother, you saved my life. I mean, how ironic is that? That by trying to take your own life, you save somebody's life. But he did. Never will let him forget about that.
That's wild, man. I don't want to say I love that, but I do love that. Through somebody else's pain it's like the phoenix, right? You're going to rise through the ashes even though it wasn't yours, but it was somebody close enough that you love dearly who has been there for you since God knows how long. That's incredible. And what a way to honor him. You give him an entire chapter in your book, which I do want to segue to that. Your book, Relentless Courage, you released it not too long ago. And it is blown up on Amazon. I've been reading the reviews. I've seen gyms help promote the book. I mean, they're plugging you all over the place, and you're doing the legwork to make it happen. Make sure people know that it's out there, and the reviews are phenomenal. I read a few today that I was like, that's what it's about. But you don't have to be a police officer. I mean, people that are in the military or civilians, family members of police officers, they're all the feel good payoff, right? Like everyone's learning something that a lot of people wish that they would know about their job or their profession or what they're going through. So I know the book. How long? When did you released it this summer? Didn't you? Was it this summer?
So it came out the very last day of April 2022. So it hasn't even been
Okay.
out a full year yet.
That's incredible, man. I'm telling you, you guys need to go on
Well,
Amazon and go check out the reviews. It's incredible.
I got to tell you how this even happened because this is
Yeah.
not something I ever envisioned, not something I planned. But our book, Relentless Courage, it's winning the battle against frontline trauma. And my co-author, amazing, amazing woman, her name is Dr. Shauna Springer, and she is a clinical psychologist. She has worked for the VA for TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors.
Mm.
She's worked with combat veterans from all services, first responders, but she is a culturally competent clinician who truly gets it. And she had already written 3 books before this. I didn't know her, but the funny thing is, this shows you how things are meant to be. She actually lives in the city that I worked in officer. We never met.
Hmm.
Our paths never crossed. She had no idea about all the things that we see and do. And she literally, this is before COVID. She hit me up on LinkedIn because I was on there just, posting things about suicide prevention, PTSI. And she said, "Hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you and just see who you are, what you're doing, and tell you what I'm doing." I'm like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So we have a phone call, and she's telling me about this procedure called stellate ganglion block, which is a medical procedure for the physical symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And then I started telling her about what I'm doing, and I told her my story. And she goes, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I kind of laughed, and I was like, I've been asked that before, actually, and I kind of have thought about it. I said, but because of post-traumatic stress, I don't think, honestly, I have the ability, the concentration, the focus to even get something like that done. Like, I don't even know where I would start.
Yeah.
And so we left our phone conversation at that. A couple months later, she hits me back up. She's like, "Look, your story," and she's like, "I've heard hundreds and hundreds of trauma stories, but your story is sticking with me, and your story is going to save countless lives." And she said, "I want to make this happen. I want to do this book with you." And that very instant, I knew it was I knew she was the right person. I said, "Let's do it." And we embarked on this journey. COVID happens. We didn't even meet in person for like over a year and a half in the project. We literally did this whole thing via Zoom. We would meet every week on Zoom for 2 hours. And there's nothing like this book out there because
Hmm.
it's not just a story or my story. It's many stories, but it also has Doc Shauna Springer's breakdown, analysis, explanation of everything in a global sense, so that not just first responders, veterans, but anybody on the street is going to understand it. They're actually going to get it. They're going to see the toll of our jobs, but more importantly, they're going to see the human behind the badge and the uniform. And I just have to give Doc Springer praise because this would have not happened had it been for Doc Springer. And she truly is a remarkable, remarkable person who gets it. She understands it. And this book is saving lives as we speak. And that's what it's about. It's saving lives.
I love that. I can't wait to read it. I just haven't gotten it yet, and I knew we were gonna get this interview going, so I'm like, I need to read this freaking book. Because I love the concept of you telling the story and her following it with the clinic. I can't say the word. Clin,
Clinical.
clinical. Thank you. Sorry, just brain fart. It's just like it's a match. It's just like oh well, here's the supporting documentation. It's just it's a good marriage, if you will, to really help somebody understand that stuff. So I can't wait to dive in and read that. Let me ask you this, just on a personal note, because I know with me, I could use a little good feel good medicine here. When we fight, and I say we, right? We have this mission to help people. We have this mission to help, and you know, we lose 22 veterans a day. It's way more than that. I am more than sure. Between and then police officers and first responders, there's just way too many people hurting. And then you get people like us who are we're hitting the pavement. We're doing what we can to help people, but then I don't know about you, but I struggle. So and like right now, I'm struggling. I lost my therapist. I haven't been to the gym. And I'm like, those thoughts just kind of like, hey, remember me over here? And I'm like, no, we've done a lot of work around that shit, and that's not what this is about. But with that, how do you take care of you? Because I know what I need to do to take care of me, and I just haven't done it. That's starting all over again tomorrow, which is good. But what does that look like for somebody like you? Because although we're out there pouring ourselves out there, we give, give, give. It's like, how do we take care of us? So I'm just curious, like, how do you take care of you?
So self-care is absolutely critical, and self-care is not being selfish. There's a common misconception out there, especially for first responders and military, that they think about if I'm doing self-care, then I'm not taking care of others. And you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself.
Mm.
That's the fact behind that. So, my journey of recovery started the end of December 15, and I'm still on a journey of recovery. I mean, I'm doing night and day than I was. I'm doing great. Like you said, there's certain things that I have to do to maintain this level of wellness, this level of positivity. And yeah, we have good days and bad days. Things happen in people's lives, stress happens. And so you have to know when you get triggered, when these things happen, you have to fall back on those fundamentals that, sometimes take years to learn. And in my case, I have a routine. A routine is very, very important.
Mm.
And for me, going to the gym is critical. I go to the gym 2 hours every day, 5 to 7 days a week. If I don't go to the gym, then I go hiking. And usually, if I go hiking, I'm hiking 5 to 10 miles a day. And so, you know, both of those things, I'm usually doing that with somebody else. So when I work out, I've got a cop buddy and I've got a Air Force buddy. When I go hiking, I'm hiking with my girlfriend or my daughter. And so I'm not isolating. I'm communicating. I'm with other people. I'm doing a healthy activity. It's reducing stress. Typically during the week, when I come back from working out before I take my shower, I meditate. I never believed in meditation, but I ended up going through this year-long program with Mission 22,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called Recovery and Resilience, and that really got me in meditation. And it's literally, it doesn't take long, but it's taking time for yourself. But it's an easy habit to break because we get so busy and you just go, I don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I've noticed on the days that I don't make time for it, I'm more irritable. Things affect me more, and so I have to go back to my fundamentals. Um, Outside of that, I still see a therapist. I used to go at the height of my recovery, I was going like twice a week. Now I see a therapist once every 2 weeks. And therapy is literally just talking to somebody,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be about my work related stuff. It could be about relationships, family issues, health issues. It's just a confidential, private, trusted, protected place where you can feel safe to talk about anything. And so, as many times as I've said, I don't need to do this anymore, I quickly realized that no, I need to do this. It's important. And even if I'm just talking about whatever, it's still healthy communication. And more importantly, I know that there's this person that I can reach out to anytime and they're there for me if I need them. And that's the key behind this whole thing. So I want people to realize that, yeah, you can get better from post traumatic stress, but also realize, like anything else, if you want to maintain your physical health, there's certain things you got to keep doing. If you want to maintain your mental health, there's things that you got to keep doing. And reading is one of them. So reading my book is definitely going to help you, but that program that I was in, the Mission 22, and I say this kind of funnily, but I wasn't a big reader. But that Mission 22 program, we had required reading, and they would send out a box of things in 4 different phases, and it would come with like 5 and 6 books. And I had to read all those books, but I'm so glad I did because reading can be very calming. It can be very relaxing if
Mm-hmm.
it's done in the right environment. And this program, it forced me out of my comfort zone when it came to reading, when it came to meditation. I also had like a coach who I would talk to. And so there's all these things. And the key is try new things. Some things work for people and they don't work for others. There's no magic one thing for everybody. Usually it's a combination of different things that work for different people. So just try something new.
I actually wrote them down. I think I'm gonna look. I saw one of their videos that they did of you, Mission 22. So I'm gonna look them up.
Phenomenal program.
Yeah, I'm gonna look. And I'll be honest with you, I had to quit my job today because I'm so like it was physically taxing, and I'm just not in a good place. And I haven't been there a few weeks, and I still love the owner of this company. I just like I'm like I am spiraling. I got no therapist. Haven't been to the gym. I'm I'm just like X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, what? Here we go again. So, like you said, you gotta identify like when this is happening, and I did that today, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like mentally, I'm not in a good place. Doesn't mean I'm in a bad place. I'm just not in a good place. But tomorrow, we're picking up where I was before I started working. That was working. Like hate reading, but yes, I want to re-implement reading. The gym, my cup of coffee. That's like my saving grace is my coffee. And good connections with all these amazing programs to help just fill my bucket. You know what I'm saying? So thank you for sharing because man, there's so many people pouring into people. And I'm like, how the hell are they taking care of themselves? So thank you for that. But real quick, I think we're doing really good on time. Where can people find your book? Is it only on Amazon or are there other places?
So it's only on Amazon,
Okay.
but on Amazon, it's either paperback, hardcover, or Kindle.
Okay.
So, you do have choices there. Unfortunately, we don't have an Audible version, and I don't know that we will. And there's reasons behind that that I can't really share during this interview, but
Yeah.
I've been asked many times because I like Audible versions myself, but unfortunately, it's just not available. But here's the cool thing. Look, although it looks huge and looks like really thick, we did write it for first responders and military people, among other people. So it's double spaced, it's big font, and
Oh,
it
jeez.
it flows very easy. No, but it really
Oh.
it's such an easy read. It's like it's from like everyone I've talked to, like you can't put it down. So I just want to warn you, like if you get it in the mail, you're gonna like, wow, this is a serious book. Like this isn't a pamphlet, which it's not. It is a real book, but it's very easy to read, and you're not going to put it down. I'm
Oh.
going to tell you right now. Oh, you know what I didn't mention either about this book is that I don't know if most listeners have heard of his name, but he's kind of a legend. But Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, the author of On Killing, On Combat,
Huh.
I think he's written like 17 books. He wrote the foreword for our book, and he is a ex Ranger. He's been speaking for over 20 years. I mean, this guy is a legend. He literally is like Madonna of the singing world. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman of the warrior world is that's who he is. He's epic, and the fact that he wrote the forward for our book is just it's unbelievable. So, um, just I'm telling you right now, get the book, read it. You're gonna love it, guarantee it.
I love that. And real quick, where can people find you?
I'm everywhere. So I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even Parlor. I'm on pretty much every social media platform you can think of. Just type in Sergeant Michael Sugrue. If you type those into any of those platforms, I'll come up. But I also do run a page. It's called First Responders First on both Facebook, Instagram, and we have a private group. And so I highly encourage you to check those out as well, because I'm constantly sharing things for all first responders, all military members, all family members. And the group, it's vetted. I make sure it's only first responders, veterans, or supporters of. And you can share whatever you want in there as long as it has to do with officer wellness or veteran military wellness. So check those out.
One last thing before we sign off here in a little bit, because I don't even think we really brushed up on this, but that's the whole point of this whole thing, right? Is breaking the stigma, or smashing the stigma. What is the stigma? Well, asking for help. It's okay to not be okay. And I had heard one of your interviewers say, I don't believe in that. I'm like, what? I'm like, no, it is okay to not be okay. I kind of understood where he was coming from, but I understood where you were coming from. And that's a big thing, and what I want to hit on is the departments are getting, like you said, the police departments are, in any department really, they're getting better at mental health, providing resources, but there's still that, I might lose my job if I do this, or maybe I'm no longer fit for duty. That's still a real thing. And that's why we did our video, Damned If I Do, to showcase that.
It's a harsh reality. Things are getting better every day, and they're definitely better than they were 10 years ago. Post traumatic stress, it doesn't have to be a life ender or a career ender. I mean, you can work a full 30 years healthy and come out the other side and enjoy retirement, but you have to talk about these things all along the way. And for us, for warriors, for military members, all first responders, we have this like feeling that we have to be invincible, that nothing bothers us. We have to put up this perfect image to not just the public, but everyone around us, including our family members. And we're human. That's what it is. We are human. Let's just acknowledge the humanity of our job and what we see. And let's just normalize talking about it. That's all this is. Let's normalize it. Just talk about it. Get it off your chest and let's move on.
I agree. I agree. I mean, and that's the hardest part is getting it out. I physically have gotten lumps in my throat because I couldn't get out what I wanted to say. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, man. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time. I think we're ready to wrap it up. You have anything else, last things you'd like to share to this crowd before we sign off?
Just one. If anybody out there is listening or watching this right now and you think that you're alone, you think you're the only one that's feeling the way that you do and that nobody's going to understand it, because that's how I thought. That's what I felt.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now that you're wrong. There's lots of people out there who truly will get it. There's lots of resources out there to help you. And all you have to do, as hard as it is, and I'm telling you right now, looking back, me asking for help was the most courageous and bravest thing I ever did. It was nothing in the military. It was nothing on the streets. It was asking for help. And that's all you need to do is make yourself a priority and ask for that help.
A freaking man, dude. A freaking man. Well, thank you again for your time. I appreciate you. Don't jump off. I'm gonna say goodbye to my listeners real quick because I do want to fill you in on some stuff. But thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
Sweet. Well, hey guys, there you go. The man, the myth, the legend. He has made his amazing appearance here on this really cool platform. And if you guys like what you heard, remember subscribe, like, share, do all that fun stuff that makes you YouTube famous. And we will catch you later.